These are struggling to hit their numbers and they're eliminating departments, sometimes even the entire HR department. We're just having a conversation around many leaders facing right now and what are some things that they can do, especially in the area of HR, as we talk about HR in alignment. So, what were your thoughts when you saw the article about the massive HR layoff?
It was shocking. It was a bit surprising. I had a lot of questions. What analysis went into that, and was really the entire HR function and HR department eliminated,
Mhm.
and or was it just a rebranding? Where now I believe they said they were going to be people operations. Were they just taking managers and saying, okay, now you have to handle your people, or were they actually doing training?
Right.
It's really, really important, I think, to make sure that some kind of analysis was done, an audit was done to see what exactly needed to have to
Mhm.
happen and the best way to go about it.
Yeah, I know.
So,
For me, anytime I see an elimination, especially the HR department, my brain goes first, like you, to the analytical side. And then it's really around, was this a restructuring or was this an emotional response to the bottom line?
right.
You know?
Well, and that is so important because obviously when leaders restructure
Mhm.
HR emotionally, they're resolving kind of how they feel today.
Yeah.
Um, but when they restructure strategically, they're really solving for what the business needs for the next year, the next 3 to 5 years. Those are very, very different decisions.
Mhm. And you and I, because we've both been in HR for so many decades, we know that not all HR is the same.
Right.
So, what is that end game? Are you looking to solve an immediate problem, or are you looking to have a sustainable plan, not just for today, but that will actually carry you over the next 3, 5 years?
Exactly. Exactly. So, is that decision being made due to some kind of crisis?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and if so, that crisis is not going to end just because you
Mhm.
make this decision today. The crisis might seem as though it's getting better.
Mhm.
3 months, 6 months down the road, we know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's going
And
to be a lot worse.
those are the times where you have to say, what is it that I need to get us out of crisis? And that's where you look at consultants, you look at advisors, you look at bringing in folks that can bring stability to that crisis. And not all the time, in my experience, is the internal team that's on site, do they have the capacity to handle the crisis and actually still plan for what we do or what will come out of this on the other side of the crisis.
Exactly. That's a key point to this is that sometimes you need an outside view. You need new, fresh eyes, new, fresh ideas that can come in and give you honest feedback. And also, I think people that are not afraid to say the difficult things out loud.
And we're no stranger to that. That's where having a balance, right? So you can have some people that, maybe new to HR or they have some experience, but when you're in crisis, I notice that you don't need that conceptual HR, the ones that let's try this, let's try that. You need the ones who actually have been through this type of situation and can bring a certain level of confidence that I have the ability to tell you the truth, even if you don't want to hear it. But you need to be able to see all angles. It's kind of like I call it an algebra equation. the if and the then, right? Because
Right.
it's going to equal into an end result. Leaders need to know what is the end result of the decisions of the if then.
You make a really good point too, though. And look, I think it's really wonderful that people get certifications and these professional certifications in their respective fields. Um, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have the experience to deal with the situation. There's a difference between passing a test and actually having hands-on
Mhm.
experience dealing with certain topics and crises, frankly. So when we talk about the bottom line,
Mhm.
it's really important to be able to make sure that from a human resource standpoint,
Mhm.
you're helping organizations to affect their bottom line,
Mhm.
uh, to meet their EBITDA goals,
Yes.
uh, and that we have the right people.
When you look at how much it will cost, so I tend to look at, all right, if you don't want to consider the people piece, oftentimes you don't look at what is your experience rating going to be as a result of letting that person go. But not only that, in this day and age, everyone is litigious. Right. So even if a false claim is going to cost you and impact your bottom line, is it worth that?
Right. Right.
So there's so many dynamics of the people piece that sometimes from an internal perspective, that is not often considered, right? Whether it's the not having the right level of HR that you need, because there are some that are just administrators, right? There are some
Yes.
that specialize in a specific area. You have to kind of look at what is the general lane of that HR person.
Right.
I know that for me, I spent years becoming a generalist. So I have experience in all the different areas of HR, but my lane is the strategic piece. And I know for
Right.
you, it's like you will break down the structure and the nuances that a lot of people don't look at. And that's what a lot of our clients tend to value, that the strategy, the structure of all aspects of the people piece, the operation piece, and then also the profitability pieces that include the EBITDA that you were talking about.
That's so important what you just said too, especially because of the fact that not all organizations are built the same, right? A
Mhm.
50-person organization is not the same as a 10-person organization or a 5,000
Mhm.
person organization. So HR is not one size fits all, and HR can't be the same at all of those organizations,
Mhm.
right? It's really important to take that into consideration and decide what is needed. And I agree with you so much about being a generalist first, understanding
Mhm.
all the different components that go into human resources, because each of those components
Mhm.
affects your asset, your people, right?
Yeah.
So it is about the employee engagement. It is about the total rewards. It is about making sure that you have policies that your employees are aware of and can follow,
Mhm.
and really make good sense. So it's about all of that. It's not just like you said. It's not just one piece.
Yeah. And I think that that's why, coming full circle, when we hear, these massive layoffs from of HR, the entire department or parts of it, or you're renaming it, it's really around first taking a step back and naming what are you trying to solve,
Right.
whether it's immediate or whether it's future, and allowing that to define what level of support that is needed, what's needed in the immediate realm, and then what is kind of the long-term plan, and allowing that to determine what your people strategy will be.
Exactly. I mean, understanding that every company is different,
Mhm.
whether it's a startup company, it's a scaling company, it's a company that's turning around. That the design needs to be different for each of those. So it's not about restructuring or strategic structuring for HR. It's
Mhm.
about the business, right? It's about auditing and aligning where that business is going to and helping you build the HR function for your actual business needs.
Mhm. Yes. And I think that there's also value when you have an HR team. Not everyone has to have industry related experience, but I think it's so helpful when you do have folks on your team that actually have worked or have experience in that particular industry, or even if it's from a seasonal perspective, because like you said, not all organizations are the same from a size perspective, but also seasonal. There is some where they have peaks and what's their target audience? Who has experience to be able to speak that language throughout the organization?
It's interesting. I once had, during an interview,
Mhm.
I had the hiring manager say, what do you know about this industry? And I said, very little,
Mhm.
actually. I've read about your organization and I certainly did some homework and researched a little bit about the industry, but I don't know very much. And the response is, well, then how can you help us? And I said, the whole point of me coming in, right? First of all, you went out of house to find somebody because you didn't have somebody that you felt in your organization who could do this. You went outside to find somebody. Um, and I think the fact that I was new to the industry gave me fresh eyes.
Mhm.
And what I like to do when I work with an organization is I roll up my sleeves and I like to get in there and I like to really spend time with people in in all the different departments, really understanding the nature of the business, really understanding the nature of the issues. Because I can tell you, the CEO might have a little bit of different opinion from a manager, right? An operational manager. Operational manager might have a little bit of a different opinion from an associate who's working and doing the work on a daily basis.
Mhm.
And it's really helpful, I think, for me to hear from all of those perspectives.
Mhm.
I learn a lot more about the business. I learn a lot more about the organization. And that helps me to really understand what some of the HR needs are.
Mhm. And you know what? And this is what I love about having these type of conversations because I have one perspective, which was kind of going industry, having some industry experience, and
Yep.
your experience is, you know what? You don't necessarily have it. But one of the things I appreciate and why we are inviting people not only into our conversation, but to also see the benefit and value of having individuals there based on their experience, but also coming to a point of consensus. Because one of the things that I do look for when I make statements like what I did was, are there any transferable skills where that individual will quickly be able to come up to speed if they are new to this specific industry? And one of the things that is so lacking that needs to really come back into the conversation is really around having placing the greatest importance on establishing partner teams and partners. And that's
Yes.
what was so different by what you said, that you would actually sit down with other leaders. You would actually engage in, hey, what's going on to see how can I best support not just my department, but the entire organization. So you're going in
It's
with
all
an
about,
entrepreneurial mindset, a higher level mindset that I hope and I pray that comes back into the HR world. And I don't know if HR will end up being having a renaming the same way that it did when it went from personnel to human resources, but
right.
definitely bringing back the original intent, which was the building teams and partnerships, not just looking at it from an HR administrative level, but being able to look at it holistically.
Well, and that's a very, very good point is that you want to make sure that there is that collaboration between human resources and the other functions
Mhm.
in an organization, because that is the way that you're going to have a successful mapping process to really understand what's needed. And I think that prevents frustration that people have, right? Like, well, I don't want to just come in and change things from a human resource standpoint just for the sake of changing. Let's hear and see a little bit about what some of the concerns are from the people who are living and breathing it on a daily basis.
What do you say to those leaders? And I don't know if you've heard it, but as I have been consulting for organizations over the past 10 years, I've actually heard a few, not very many, but where they actually dissuade HR from having conversations with others. They want them just to wait and have the issues come to them and then dealing with it then, or else they're labeled as troublemakers. And we saw that even with the recent layoffs of the entire department, where that was part of the thought process.
That's just not the type of HR professional that I want to be. I don't want to be seen as the HR police or the HR gatekeeper. I don't want to walk into a room and people say, oh, there's HR who's getting fired today. I
Yeah.
mean, this really is what I like to look at as a new day in human resources, which is going in and truly being engaging
Mm-hmm.
with people. Um, I am there to help the bottom line. You know, I'm there to make sure that the organization is meeting its goals. And who helps the organization meet its goals? That's human resources. Why do I say that? Because the people
Mm-hmm.
are what drive an organization to meet its goal. And so part of human resources is the development, the coaching, the counseling, um, the measuring of productivity to make sure that we're meeting all these things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times people don't seem to realize that how HR affects the P&L. I think I told you once, Rhonda, that I had someone say to me, well, HR is the L in P&L.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought, wow, really? But you're missing so much. They're looking at human resources as as he put it, a back of the house uh, function that we don't really need. And I just thought, well, no, 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 you're not thinking about it in the correct terms, right? Human resources helps to create and support retention programs to reduce turnover. The turnover spend, could be 50 to 200% of somebody's annual salary, right? The leadership development that certainly reduces costs of mishires. The cultural alignment that increases productivity, and I mean that's something that's measurable. Compliance, from a compliance standpoint, you want to make sure that human resources is acting on those compliance pieces. Turnover, again, um, legal exposure,
Mm-hmm.
all of these things are topics that human resources can support
Mm-hmm.
and collaborate with the other leaders of the organization
Mm-hmm.
and really help an organization to thrive. And that is what affects your P&L. And that's how the P gets affected.
Yes. And I think that what something you said was so key that I am a big believer in. It's the measuring of productivity. Because oftentimes I've been in environments where the perception is that HR is the L, right? Because there's not enough conversation around the metrics. So I sometimes challenge the HR leaders that we have to get out of speaking in terms of theory or I heard or I think and really come and pass around a HR scorecard, something that it's almost as if from the finance department to the C-suite leaders that they're
Right.
able to look at and see what is the current status and then based off of the development programs, right? The investments in bringing the organization to compliance, they're able to see benchmarks of growth, benchmarks of improvement versus there's a cost. I'm paying out all of this money in salaries and in program development, but I don't have any measurement of what is the ROI in this. So there's constant thought around loss in payroll, loss in development, loss in training, loss in constantly investing in things, but there's no measurement of how is this adding to the bottom line versus subtracting from it.
And that's the piece that organizations need to recognize and become really comfortable with
Mhm.
is what do those numbers look like? What is the value add by your human resources team?
Have found is the benefit of investing in consultants to come in and being able, and I can't speak for all consultants because all
Right.
consultants are not the same, they're not equal, but I know that what you and I do is we tend to look at all of those attributes and being able to, number one, stabilize an organization, getting them out of crisis, right? And then being able to plan for the future. And then we hire our replacements. So that continuity would continue even when it's time for us to kind of step away, because now we have put in place the infrastructure that's needed for everyone. It ends up adding value to the P and not the L in the P&L.
Exactly. Exactly. I agree with you wholeheartedly on that.
For anyone who is listening to our conversation, and it's the reason why we offer leadership conversations, so that way we can just talk about where you are and where do you need to get to in order to stabilize or to scale or grow.
Right. It's that discovery type of conversation to really understand where you are,
Mhm.
where you want to be, and how we can help you with that.
Yes. And we also highlight gaps, blind spots, because I think that in our career, we've been through just about every crisis there is.
Oh, certainly. There's too many to list.
I
There's
know.
so many to list.
Yeah, but a lot of what you said, one of the things is we believe in partnerships. We don't believe in being viewed as the HR police. I think I'll speak for myself. I know what it feels like to walk the halls and hearing the whispers of the warden is on the floor, you know, or being called the Terminator. Uh, Look, we have to do what we have to do, but that is not the function. We have to ensure that, we right size and that everyone is consistently following policies and procedures, but that is such a small aspect of what we do. HR needs to be known for.
Yes. And I'll tell you, there was an organization that I worked with, where, I mean, again, this comes from the top, right? So, what does the HR leadership want HR to look like for that organization? And in this particular organization, it was, well, HR has the final say, and HR has,
Mm.
makes the decisions, and I really feel like it's a collaboration.
Mhm.
I don't know that that was the right way to approach things, especially because I kept hearing code purple, and I kept
Hmm.
thinking, what is code purple? I
Yeah.
hear code purple every time I show up.
Wow.
I was code purple. So apparently, when I showed up in the building, they all got on walkie talkies and were saying code purple.
Wow.
And that was to let everybody know that human resources there. I don't know where I got purple from, but
Wow.
that's my name. I
Wow.
was really proud, though, to say that
That's a new one.
yeah, it changed. It did change over the years. So with new HR leadership, that did change.
Yeah.
Um, I found that HR leadership became more collaborative, as opposed to just really um, a leadership that said the buck stops with us.
Mhm.
That's really not what we like to do from a human resource standpoint. It is, how can we serve the business and work in cooperation and collaboration with the business to get it to where we need to be? How can human resources help?
Yeah.
That was a big change, and I'm
Yeah.
glad to see it.
Your lens and your vantage point is serving the business, and I'm wholeheartedly serving the vision. So that way it's kind of like I'm always looking at 10,000 feet and being able to see what's here, what's coming, and what's, looking at the historical knowledge as well. And then you're looking at all of the business and all of the different layers. So now when we're coming together with the vision and the business, we're able to almost secure that corporate veil, identifying who, if you have the right people in the right position, right place, what do we need to restructure, current and future? And then also looking at from a partnership level, everyone at the table, what's needed to ensure that EBITDA, P&L, all the metrics, the programs, everything speaks to the vision and the visionary. And there's not one person that can say, I am the final decision maker, like HR. They're not
Right.
the ones that
Right.
take the fall if something goes wrong, because there's agreement and alignment throughout the entire organization.
Well, you and I have been collaborating like that for, it's hard to say, but it's more than 2 decades, actually.
Yes, it has been.
You and I,
Well, I'll be exact, 26 years.
yeah. I mean, you and I have been collaborating in that same vein,
Mhm.
right? Um, I remember when we first started working together, and we had very, very different clients that we were dealing with at that time.
Yes.
Um, but I remember you sharing thoughts and ideas, and me sharing thoughts and ideas to see, well, what's going to work best,
Mhm.
and how can we best help the business,
Mhm.
right? There were sometimes scenarios where you would ask me, how would you handle this, and I would ask you the same question. What would
Mhm.
you do in this particular situation? And that, I really feel, is why we've been so successful,
Mhm.
is because we are willing to be open,
Yes.
we are willing to be vulnerable, if you will, and say, what do you think it would take to make this work and to make this better?
Mhm.
Right? Not locked in and tied into only ideas and experiences that we've already had personally, but really working to share what else might be out there. Always investigating, always educating ourselves. Very important to do, to continue. Just
Mhm.
because we've had this, these years of experience doesn't mean that we won't still continue learning and growing,
Yeah.
trying new things.
And that's what's so key. And I believe that that has been the key to our collaboration. And even though we were in two different territories, we never stopped asking questions.
Right.
It was always help me to understand. And it had to be.
That's your favorite phrase too. I love it.
I'm consistent. It's even if I think I know what the outcome should be, I want to be able to say to someone, I explored every single option out there. So no one
Right.
can come and say that they weren't included in the decision, they weren't
Right.
included in the journey to the outcome. And I have just found that that question opens up the dialogue where it's not threatening, where it's not confrontational. It's an
Right.
opportunity to for me to see through their lens what it is that they were thinking about,
Right.
what would they like to see. And it's just a great way to understand how can we at least meet in the middle to get to a mutual ending.